We are celebrating him today because Nigeria's best and brightest have gathered in this room. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar GCON, former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have in the room former Senate President of Nigeria, eminently led by Chief Ken Nnamani, former Speaker Alhaji Masuri, former Speaker and Governor Aminu Tambuwal, Speaker Chief Ben Carlo. We welcome you. Then the eminent Nigerians, as I was introducing the Senate President, I missed out the Senate President who somebody described as 8 years he was Senate President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Senator David Mark. So that shows you that it's not in the number of tribes we have in Nigeria or the population of the ethnic group, but the capacity of the individual. I can also see former Speaker Dimeji Bankole. There is no smoke without fire. But in Nigeria, there can be a thick pall of smoke, and yet there is no fire. And that is my brother and Adazi Obosi, Chief Emeka Anyaoku. And then we have numerous governors, former governors who are present here with us. The governor of Abia State is represented by his deputy governor, Metu FNSE. His Excellency Rotimi Amechi, former governor of Rivers State. His Excellency Donald Duke, former governor of Cross River State. His Excellency Celestino Mejia, former governor of Rivers State. His Excellency Wada Bindo, former governor of Adamawa. But you know that if you are an MC, you have to MC well. And if you are a talker, you have to talk well. We also have in our presence, the former governor of Osun State. He is present here, Governor Ilola. We have Alhaji Adamu Waziri, former Minister of Police Affairs. I can also see distinguished senators here present with us. Senator Baribe is here in the House.
Senators, ndị ọzọ nọ ebe a ndị Igbo biko ejiba aha ụnụ na-eburu ọjị a ebunye onye isi bụ General Chief Olusegun Obasanjo.
We'll hand it over to the
you have to write it well.
Okay.
So the next one I have to have a call to.
Okay.
So
Okay.
at one time when I was campaigning, suddenly you said to me that I do not like it. And the rumor started gathering momentum. I was wondering how I would handle it. I went to England and I went with my son, who was the product not only of my liking him, but of my loving him. And I told him,
yes.
after I had the
Yes.
outside, I met the leaders of thought. And I said, I do not know how this chief of campaign started. So I took my believe that this Kula will have to go to people health. And not only because it is the tradition and the culture. And Emeka, I want to thank you especially for bringing these aspects of our culture and tradition. And maybe I will have more to say about our tradition and culture when we talk about democracy later.
As Chidume Okoro, you know, so.
Okay, very briefly, if there's such a thing as briefly, about the man Emeka. But I know that the protocols have been heavy, but also our celebrant and his dear wife have not been introduced. So let me start by introducing our celebrant, His Excellency Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, and his lovely wife, Ebere Ihedioha, Her Excellency. Indeed, I want to speak very briefly about a young man. I say young, he's still young at 60. But let me speak very briefly about a young man who I met well over 30 years ago. Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, as it were, was a very young, energetic, dynamic man when I met him way back in 1992. At the time I met him, he was a very young bachelor and had graduated from university and had started work in the National Assembly. Emeka was one gentleman that was easily recognizable, not because of his stature, not because of his complexion, but because of his energy. Emeka was one man who was all over the place, all the time. And that endeared him to myself and several others. So we had this young, dynamic man who indeed, as it were, had a bright future ahead of him. But at that particular time, he was just a young boy who had become an assistant to the Senate President. But after the very short-lived tenure, Emeka continued with his vision and his focus. Emeka had a great vision, first as a media person, and he started a company called First Page Communications. And he was, if you understand Emeka, you know Emeka, you'll understand that this is one gentleman who very few people can contain. Emeka was uncontainable even then. And one day Emeka came up to me, because Emeka and I became like family and brothers. Emeka came up to me and said he wanted to get married. And I said, oh, really? At this age? You know? In fact, I would say that when I met his beautiful wife, Ebere, she struck me as just the right thing for this gentleman that had uncontrollable energy. Ebere was a very quiet, very, very humble woman, young lady then, very tall, very elegant, dark-skinned, Emeka fair-skinned. You know, just two opposites in character and in everything else. And I said, glory be to God. Emeka has someone that can contain him. Ebere was the exact opposite. But the beauty of Ebere is that in her quietness is great strength. And sometimes my friend and brother Emeka needs to be controlled. And the best person to manage Emeka at any point in time is Ebere. And so for me, I want to celebrate both of them. Emeka has grown, as it were, over the years, but not just by the grace of God, and not just by accident. Emeka is a man who I have learned lessons from. Emeka is one man who is intentional, extremely intentional. He sets his eye on a goal, and his commitment to achieving it knows no bounds. He's a gentleman who, at every point in time, would set out to achieve something that appears unattainable. But along the way, because of his commitment, his resilience, and his energy,
well, we have been told to keep to the protocol. But I will keep to the protocol as much as possible. But when my former vice president is here, I cannot but recognize him. Well, I cannot but also recognize Mrs. Ihedioha. We are celebrating your husband, and we are celebrating you as well. I cannot but recognize my in-law, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, who, when it pleases him, he wants us to play senior brother and junior brother. But he's my in-law, and he hasn't paid the dowry that he has to pay. I appreciate you. I cannot also but recognize my very good friend, in whose house history was made in this country, Chief Okeke. The Nigerian Civil War actually ended in his house, because that was where I met Philip F. Young on that fateful day. I cannot but also recognize Bishop Kuka. I understand he will be talking to us later. Bishop Kuka and I have gone a bit of a long way. But I keep telling him that I will get to the kingdom of God before him. And he keeps telling me that he has become a bishop because of me, so that I can get to the kingdom of God. Well, you will forgive me if among governors, former governors, attempted governors, I will also recognize Peter Obi, who so let me now come back to Emeka. Emeka, I felicitate with you on this day. And I listened attentively to what Leal have said about you. And all I will say to that is that I concur.
They say you should bring the microphone closer to your mouth. We're not hearing you.
And why didn't you say it publicly so that they can hear? Why are you whispering into my ears instead of saying, bring the telephone close to your mouth so that everybody can hear you?
They said they sent your son so that you will not be angry.
Now that you have said it, what is more? He said, so that I will not be angry. What is to make me angry if you are correcting me correctly? But let us have a wonderful day. You said to me we will start at 10 o'clock so that we can end at about 1 o'clock because of those who are fasting. And I don't want to take too much of your time, except to say that this is a day that we are all happy to be here with you, to celebrate with you, and to share the joy of this day with you. The little I know about you is that you are a determined man. There's no perfect human being. But the little also that I know about you, you are almost a perfect human being. Again, the little I know about you, you take things as they come. And you are unperturbed by even the seeming and apparent injustice when they come to you. For me, I will do everything to be here with you today, and you know that. And I'm really happy to be here with you. And you have chosen for discussion, which again, I believe, is an indication of your mind, of what you believe for this country. You have chosen for discussion democracy. Is it failing in Africa? Are we talking of democracy? Or are we talking of Western liberal democracy? I will not preempt what Bishop Kuka will be saying. But when we talk of democracy, we should remember that in Africa, before the colonial rule and the colonial power, we have a form of government which attended to the needs of our people. And whatever you call it, to me, it is democracy. Because what is democracy about? The American President Abraham Lincoln defined it as government of the people, by the people, for the people. Democracy is meant to be a system of government that delivers, and delivers to all the people, not just a section of the people, not just a few. But what do we have today? I believe since we gone past the Greek democracy, which brought everybody to the square, and everybody has a say in the decision making, which affects everybody, or which affected everybody. Democracy has now become representative democracy. And representative democracy has not taken care of everybody. Today we have democracy, which is government of the people, of small number of people, by small number of people, over large number of people who are deprived of what they need to have in life. Now that is not democracy that will endure. So if you are talking of democracy failing in Africa, democracy in Africa has failed. And why has it failed? Because it didn't have any, in context and in content, it's not African. It does not have any aspect of our culture, our way of life, what we stand for, what we believe. Ubuntu. I am because we are. It is I am because I can grab. What sort of democracy brings you and you grab everything and then illegally, corruptly, and you say go to court? When you know that even in the court you cannot get justice. So if democracy is not that democracy is failing, democracy is dying. And if we are going to make democracy not to die, we have to look at democracy in the context and in the content of Africa. I hope that we will get to that stage, so that democracy which will deliver will be the democracy that we will have in Africa. Thank you.
I should tell you exactly what I was telling President Obasanjo. I told him that since he's a privileged ex-president and he is traveling on a private plane, can he please give me a lift to Sokoto? And you see him turning his face. But I told him it's better to have the blessing of a bishop than to... Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and a great privilege for me to be here. Thomas Hobbes says that his twin brother was fear. And as a result, he conceived of a notion of a state. Because the whole question was, what do you call the state of nature? That is, state of nature is a state in which there is no sovereign and no government. And the idea is, what will a perfect government look like? And because of the history, the culture, where he grew up and how he grew up, he lived in mortal fear. And he therefore argued that for democracy to thrive, or for any system of government to be just, fair, and equitable, it had to be of such a nature that it had what you call a leviathan, that is a sovereign, that will have literally all the power, will aggregate all the powers. We call them dictators now. But his idea was that if we gave one person so much power, in exchange for that, he would look after all of us. And so he believed that left on our own devices, we as humans will get bestial. That's why he came up with those 3 words, that in a state of nature, life will be nasty, it will be brutish, and it will be short. Now, John Locke, who was a far more influential philosopher, political philosopher, was a medical doctor in Oxford. Again, he had his own problems. He fled to the Netherlands. But he finally came back. And because of the circumstances that he grew up in, lack of freedom, he was persecuted in Oxford and other places, but he grew up cherishing certain ideals, some of which underpin the philosophy of what led to the foundation of the United States of America. Because that is why when you read John Locke, he talks about key issues: liberty, freedom, religious freedom, limited government. And his argument was that, unlike Thomas Hobbes, we shouldn't transfer power to a sovereign and hope that he will look after us all. Well, no. John Locke believed that each and every one of us, created in the image and likeness of God, requires just a space to be able to exercise their freedom. And so he agitated for what he called limited government. And he focused on natural rights, the rights that are given to us, and they inhere on us as human beings. The quality and quantity of rights that in 1948 became the United Nations Human Rights Declaration. He focused on private property. Every individual had a right to own their own property. Feudalism does not believe that ordinary people can own their own property. So what he had as a social contract argued that citizens are actually free to rebel. And he argued for separation between church and state. And his argument was that if at the end the sovereign is unable to do what he has promised or is elected to do, then he deserves to go. Now, when the Americans founded what is now the United States of America, all of you remember the 1776 Declaration. And I read part of it. Because remember that those who founded America were Christians who fled from Europe. And at that time, the Catholic Church had a lot of power. And that is why up till today, the United States of America remains quite suspicious and has literally tried to close the door to the entrance of Catholics into the presidency of the United States. So after John Kennedy, it took how many years? Then Joe Biden. All of this grew out of the fact that the founding fathers of America focused on the fact that the inspiration that they derived from John Locke. So in the 1776 Declaration, it says, and I read it out to you, it says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with another, that is, the bonds that connected them to the United Kingdom, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal section of the laws of nature, they are entitled to a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, that it requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. And he says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And among these are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is that by whichever way you spell it, in whichever language, the central basis and tool for legitimating democracy, why we have chosen democracy, is like Churchill said. Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for others. Because others have been tested, they have been tried, but they've been found wanting, because only democracy entitles citizens to be able to pursue happiness. How they define that happiness, how they aggregate their happiness is purely up to them. And then to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, when a government becomes destructive to the principles that have been initiated, it is the right of the people to alter and to abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing powers in such form as to them shall most likely be the effect of safety and happiness. But then he says, prudence and indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for the light and transient causes. Now, when the American Constitution was written in 1787, it was ratified in 1788, and then finally came into operation in 1789. But guess what? Even with that document, with all the aspirations, the point still remained that the same Constitution did not include black people. In fact, the American Constitution was written for white propertied men. Okay? Even if you were white and you were poor, you were not included in that Constitution. If you were a woman, you are not included in that Constitution. If you were a slave, you are not included in that Constitution. But here it is, because there's a lot of debate in Nigeria about this Constitution is imperfect, we want a new Constitution. The point of the fact is that no Constitution can be better than either the Holy Quran or the Holy Bible. Yet we are still living in sin. So it's not so much the content of the document. There is nothing like a perfect document, a perfect Constitution. Even a Constitution in its malfunction form can still be a tool. It's a question of what is in the heart and what do you think about other people. But then, the Americans were quick to rectify their Constitution. And within a 5-year period, now in 1865, they decided to amend the Constitution, the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. America realized we couldn't continue like Abraham Lincoln would say, have this and have that. Then, after slavery was abolished, black people were still not part of the system. So then in 1868, there was the 14th Amendment. That 14th Amendment conferred rights on citizens across board. And you know, the problem with Nigeria is that we've refused to resolve the issue of citizenship. When I was chairman of the governing council of Nasarawa State University, I told them I'm a bishop, but there will be no opening prayer. There will be no opening prayer. So for me, this whole thing about Christian prayer and Muslim prayer, so it just confuses people. But this is why Nigerians continue to dig and dig and dig. And they say if you are digging and you realize it's too deep, stop digging. It's not about stopping religion, but it's about the weaponization and instrumentalization of religion, because we are just reinforcing our identity. Why will it be, for me, why will it be the case that somehow somebody, a Muslim, prays for me? God doesn't have Muslims and doesn't have Christians. He just has children. So those of you who go around telling God to catch your enemy, I say you are wasting your time, because the person you are calling your enemy, he stole from you. He didn't steal from God. So if you go to report him, God will say, this is my son and this is my daughter. So face your problem. But common citizenship then became important. It was not enough to end slavery. What are our rights as citizens? And then at the end, the 15th Amendment in 1870 now conferred on black people and everybody the right to vote. But here's the interesting thing. Women, it's not only now that your problem started. Because even at that time, black people were allowed to vote. Black men were allowed to vote. It was not until 1920 that white women were able to vote. The point I'm making is that democracy is a work in progress. And with all these imperfections, it must be admitted that the essence, that is why democracy must have an eraser. You make a mistake, you correct it. You make a mistake, you correct it. The challenge for us in Nigeria is that every time, and I think it was my friend Donald Duke who made the point. He said that, the problem in Nigeria, everybody who comes as governor wants to go back to the bottom of the hill to start something completely different. If we do not have a mechanism by which we are measuring our growth, then our chest for a democratic society becomes an empty chest. So the question is, there is an American political scientist who published an article. You can find it online. His name is Kostika Bradatan. And the title of his article is, Democracy is for the Gods. Democracy is for the gods. And his argument is that the principles enunciated in democracy are not achievable by mere human, because in reality, when you say we talk about justice, Justice Oputa used to say, when you talk of justice, has anybody ever seen justice walking on the streets? Because everybody wants justice. The criminal wants justice, the victim wants justice. And Justice Oputa used to say to me, he said, look, in Nigeria, for justice to really be effective, there are three, it has to be, justice is a three-way street. Justice for the perpetrator, justice for the victim, and justice for the larger society. So one day I was talking to him, I said, Papa, there should be another fourth leg of justice. It's possible to have justice for the perpetrator, justice for the victim, justice for the society, but there has to be justice before God. But Brother Tan makes the point that we are mere mortals, and that a perfect democracy first doesn't exist, because for it to exist, it has to be by a perfect God. And that the notion of equality is an oxymoron, because there's nothing like, there's no ruler for measuring equality. If you go to the National Assembly, the senators are all senators, but they say they are ranking senators. Ranking senators. No matter your competence, it has to be, you have to fall behind those who have come before you. So this is the kind of society we are living in. Why is it that we kneel down to greet some people and we stand to greet other people? Why is it that we're saying rank and dede to other people and then we are not? This is the reality we are in. However, the point to make is that democracy and its principles are an endless contestation, both of ideas, of opportunities, and privilege. Because those who are privileged want to hold on to their privileges, and those who are the victims want to insist that life can be better. But in the final analysis, Matthew chapter 23 verse 9, Jesus said something that I find incredible. He says, call no one on earth father, because you have only one father. So this is why we're calling ourselves Muslims or Christians or non-believers or whatever. God said, you have got only one father. The only problem with us in Nigeria is that if you are discriminating against me because I'm a Muslim, or that I'm a Christian, or whatever, we are children of one God. And if we are not treating one another right, one of us must be a bastard. So, it is to make the point, the philosopher Abraham Maslow came up with a theory, which is a common theory, you can Google it. It's called the hierarchy of needs. And that all of us want the same thing. Simply because you are president, you still want to breathe. Every elected official wants to be liked. We crave affection. We want self-esteem. We want a sense of belonging and a sense of safety. And there are what you call physiological needs. That is needs that come to us because we are human, such as the quality of air we breathe. Even though in Africa, even though we are in a democracy, there are certain people who behave as if God gave them the permission, they will decide who will breathe and who will not breathe. Unfortunately, there are certain things that God has given us for free, which those of you who have power cannot control. Whether you are PDP or APC, I think it was somebody who said that it doesn't matter. All these tall people, no matter how tall you are, whether you are tall or short, you can still see the sun, and nobody sees it better than the other. So the challenge for democracy is not so much its claims. It is the extent to which, due to the consciousness of people, that's why there are correlations between the quality of democracy. Okay? Amartya Sen published a beautiful little book. He titles it The Argumentative Indian. And his argument in the book was to say that, look, why don't come and tell us, and President Obasanjo made the point, Western liberal democracy, the question is not the name you give it. A rose by any other name is a rose. But in his argument, he says that don't come and tell us that you are teaching us how to reason. Because we Indians have always been argumentative. And democracy is about debate. And the debate is based on the way people perceive things. So people talk about a point of view. But a point of view is actually a point from a view. Okay? Depending on where you are sitting, some of you who are sitting slanted, there's a way you are looking at me differently from the people who are right in front of me. So the challenge therefore is, we as Africans inherited a system we were not in the room. Okay? But it's still not enough to say that because democracy is a Western construct, therefore it is inimical to our culture. You know, I always say to my people, when especially at marriages, You know, when you hear a Nigerian who is married in the Catholic Church, when he wants to start behaving badly, you start saying, according to African culture. That is, he wants to marry a second wife. Catholic Church say, no, you cannot marry a second wife. And then people start saying, the wife is pregnant. They say, you know, man, no be wood. You know? Now, it is that, yes, we inherited this from Europe, but why are we defining, how many of you sitting here define going for a holiday to mean going to Togo? Imagine if you call your wife now and say, my dear, we are going on holidays, so but I want us to go and see Cameroon. Okay? Or you say to your wife and children, this year we are going to go on holidays either to Yola or to Sokoto or to whatever. It's not interesting. So we cannot with one side of our mouth say that because democracy is a Western construct, therefore it isn't of relevance to us. Because the reality of our life is defined by Western constructs and Western mindsets. And in any case, the world has come to a point in which it's no longer a question of where you stand. All the walls of division have collapsed. Therefore, the challenge is, what do we do with our heritage? In 1914, when the First World War took place, luckily in 2014, I was invited to deliver a lecture in a place in Sarajevo. And Sarajevo, as you know, is where Archduke Ferdinand was killed. It was the 100th anniversary of the killing of Archduke Ferdinand, which was said to have sparked up the First World War. I went and saw the place. And you could do the measurement and do the arithmetic and ask yourself, how did it happen? Different story. But after the First World War, because the war was fought so as to end all wars, it didn't end all wars. Because shortly after, there was a Second World War. But guess what? After the First World War, people said, no, we can't, this is not us as humans. So they created the League of Nations. And the League of Nations was supposed to help nations come to terms with the fact that, look, we need to rethink. Because how could we have descended to this stage in which we're behaving like animals and killing one another? As a postgraduate student, the first essay we were asked to write at the University of Bradford, the title of the essay was, is war a biological necessity or is it a human invention? Is war a biological, and it is based on an essay written by the anthropologist Margaret Mead. Is war a biological necessity or is it a human need? So the human tendency, which again, if you are a Christian and you read the Bible, James chapter 4 talks about what is the basis? Why do we all fight? Our fighting is driven by greed. Yet, as we said, the Second World War was fought, and then arising from that was the United Nations. The point I'm making is that it's not enough that we are quarreling. It is not necessarily a bad thing that we are quarreling. Democracy is quarrelsome. Marriage is quarrelsome. There's no part of our life that is not full of. The challenge is not so much that we are going to live in a society in which nobody is having any problem. No, it is how do we manage the problems. And for us in Africa, after independence, we saw what we went through. Mandela calls his biography a long walk to freedom, but for me it's a long trek to freedom. Because after independence, our first nationalists, it's very interesting that if you look at the history of Africa, the experiment with democracy, Jomo Kenyatta, Mobutu, Oyadema, Kereko, all of these people, all of them, literally dictators. Because we worked on the fact that, and this is a problem Nigeria has still not resolved, the relationship between feudalism and the claims of democracy. Because we are unable to resolve this. In Europe and in America, democracies had to literally demolish feudal institutions before you could erect. But now we are in Nigeria, and we are in state assemblies, we are everywhere, everybody is, you have to be a chief, you have to be a title person. So, and usually what I do now is if I meet people in Nigeria, I just bend down and say, hello chief, how are you? Because you have to assume the person is a chief. Because if he will not tell you he's not a chief, but he will at least, you have solved the problem. But a society which is making claims to certain levels of equality, we can ask the question, what is the difference between democracy in Africa and democracy in Asia? There are differences. For example, if you look at the life of somebody like Lee Kuan Yew, it's very interesting because we all admire Lee Kuan Yew. He's a fantastic man. But look at, Lee Kuan Yew came to power in 1959. That's when he became Prime Minister of Singapore. And he didn't step down until 1990. So that is 31 years of conducting elections and winning elections. All right? And even when he had to step down, he didn't go away. He made himself what you call senior minister. So he put somebody, and part of the reason was that his son, whom he was training to be prime minister, was not ready. So he put somebody there, and then he called himself senior minister. And he stayed as senior minister for 14 years. There was a minister there, but he was literally. And then when later on he brought another person, and then he still called himself mentor minister. Okay? And he was mentor minister from 2004 to 2011, when he probably could no longer work. Now, all of us admire him, but that means that he was president of his country for, literally, he supervised the affairs of his country for 50 years, 52 years. The point to make is, and this is where President Obasanjo's point is important, it's not so much what do we make out of the goals of human rights, justice, fairness, equity. What do we make of them when we come to pursue them in Africa? This is the question. And of course, there has been a huge debate as to what kind of democracy really works for us. For them in Singapore, the luck they had was that Lee Kuan Yew went to Cambridge. He and his wife, they both went to Cambridge and came back with first class. And he raised the bar. Lee Kuan Yew decided that the only people who could work in the public service in Singapore has to be the equivalent of the Nigerians who are heading to NNPC. If you got a first class, you went to public service in Singapore. Because he understood very well that the wheelbarrow or the escalator carrying the good intentions of government has to be of a certain quality. And this is the mistake that many of us make. We think that we abuse a president. Maybe we should abuse them. But we abuse a governor. And we are saying that, the problem with this, the president is not doing this, governor is not doing this. The first time I got a shock of this was when I went to visit President Shagari after he came out of prison. I sat down with him for about 3-4 hours. And he started telling me things that I had never imagined. Because he said, if you see the bills that I tried to sponsor, but the National Assembly said, no way. So, if you do not have a bureaucracy, which is what carries your will to the people, then what you'll have is that there is a disconnection between the amount of money voted and the amount of work that is done. So Lee Kuan Yew understood this. And he made sure that his public servants in Singapore were earning far more money than any civil servant anywhere in the world. Okay, so the civil service became an attractive place. Comparing with our situation in Nigeria, somebody wants to marry your daughter now, and the man appears. He says, "My name is so and so. I work in MAMSA. I work in National Orientation Agency." You look at the man, National Orientation. Okay, it's no longer about. So the guy has gone away. Then another person comes and says, "Maybe your daughter doesn't really like the man." The man said, "My father is a senator, Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's better for your daughter to marry senator than to go and marry civil servant." So the question, therefore, is that the inability of our system to deliver on the principles of democracy is not out of bad will. It is largely because we've not dealt with the whole question of who are delivering on the services. I'd like to try and end because I still have a few things, but let me try and see if I can end. The question then is, how do we measure the benefits of democracy? We all understand that at the end of it all, democracy hangs on principles such as, for example, democracy promises cultural and religious freedom. That's why the First Amendment of the American Constitution, First Amendment, was to insert the freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of the press. You cannot hope to be in a democracy if the media does not have the opportunity to do its job. Okay? The second point is, the essence of democracy is the defense of human rights, anchored on the principles of equity and fairness. Now, Justice Oputa, again, he was my father. I learned so much from him. I've been lucky, a very lucky Nigerian. I've worked with 3 justices of the Supreme Court, Justice Oputa, Justice Uwes, Justice Nikki Toby, and thanks to President Obasanjo in many respects. But he used to tell us a joke. He said, somebody went to London, and then the man got to London. He was saying, I want to go to the, please, he saw a cleaner. He said, I want to go to the High Court of Justice. Where is the way? The man said, look, go all the way. Just keep going. You turn right, turn left, then you see the High Courts there. But whether they deliver justice, I don't know. But you will find the High Courts there. Now, we worry, and I hear Nigerians every day we are convinced that what is wrong with our country is that we have a justice system that is not working. I feel sorry for the people who are judges. I really do. Because during these elections, even me, small me, metaphorically and practically, I'm not a big man, small me, I have people calling me. Talk to so and so. Talk to so. If you are a judge in Nigeria, there was a case of a friend of mine who was a governor, and he was in the tribunal. And we were sitting down somewhere. They said they want to come and somebody wants to see me. So I went to see the man. He said, "This governor is your friend. We have a tribunal. He has a tribunal case, and my wife is the chairman of the tribunal. He has not even looked for me. Hasn't come to see me." That is, and the poor woman is sitting there trying to do right. Her husband's people are on her neck. Her classmates are on her neck. Everybody who went to the same university is on her neck. Priests are on her neck. Imams are on her neck. Emirs are on her neck. To deliver what? To deliver justice. The only election that is fraudulent in Nigeria, in our calculation, is the one that my man didn't win. But the one that my man won, will find all the reasons in the world to justify it. I agree that there is urgent need for us to clean up the system. But look at what has happened in other places. There's a man that, many of you remember Thurgood Marshall. I'm sure many of you remember him, Justice of the Supreme Court of America. Now, Thurgood Marshall was a fantastic judge. And he was one of those who struggled for human rights for black people. Now, they wanted to get him into the Supreme Court because this is where political will is important and the methods by which we recruit people into public life. Because there was this man, well, my notes are all mixed up now. Please excuse me. This is what happens from not having a special assistant. I do. President Obasanjo is volunteering, but I'm not stupid. Because whatever I give to him, I will get back. So I'm trying to find something. I'm so sorry. Please give me a second. Now, yes. So, a president, a governor, there are signals that people in authority must send out. When George Bush decided to appoint Colin Powell as the president, as the chairman, joint chief of staff, he was sending out a message. It was the first black man. But that also gave a sign of where he was going and where he was placing black people. You have to follow that trajectory before you come to Condoleezza Rice, before you come to other people and then come to Obama. See, as I'm standing here now, I come from Southern Kaduna, and my brother, General Musa, his appointment, women stop pounding in Southern Kaduna. We have to stop. President Obasanjo is here. One day he went to, I'm sure he remembers, when General Agwe left the army, so he organized a Thanksgiving. President Obasanjo went. And then as I was driving in, he was going out. So I didn't say anything to him. Later on, I called him because he was going to my village to condole the wife of a former minister, my best friend. So when I called him later on at night, I said, "Sir, I saw you." He said, "Yes, okay." I said, "I really want to thank you." He said, "Thank me for what?" I said, "No, thank you for General Agwe, and thank you for appointing General Luka. Both of them are from Southern Kaduna." And President Obasanjo said to me, "What are you thanking me for?" You can't hear me. Okay, let me tell you a joke that I told last week. You know, one pastor, you know, only we in the Catholic Church, when people want to get married, it takes them about 6 months of preparation. We send out bands to wherever they have been. So there was this, but in the Protestant churches, I don't know whether, but what they do is they wait until the day of the wedding. Then the bride and the groom will stand, and the pastor will say, look, these two people want to get married. If anybody in this congregation knows why they cannot get married, please come forward and tell us. So, but in this particular case, two people were standing, the bride, everybody all dressed up. So they were, so if anybody knows why James and Teresa cannot get married, please step forward and tell us. If not, forever keep quiet. So everybody, of course, nobody always gets up. Because people are already prepared for enjoyment. Why, even if you know something, you keep your mouth shut. But all of a sudden, they turn in the church and saw one woman, heavily pregnant, carrying a child and pulling another child. She was walking towards the pastor. So everybody began to panic. The bride saw this woman coming. She decided to start running from it and crying. So the woman walked all the way to the pastor. So the pastor gave her a microphone. He said, those of us at the back there, we can't hear you. I'm sorry, so please let me. I'm sorry, let me come back to what I was saying. Thank you. But a president or a governor must make certain choices and send out signal about where they're going. But if you may be wondering, they just announced a new university in Southern Canada. If you're wondering, what are you laughing about? What are you excited about? Oga, you will be excited. Because in the history, since Kaduna State was created in 1986, the only sign of industry that we saw in Kaduna was under Balarabe Musa, who started building a ginger factory in a place called Kachia. And then, as you know, he was impeached. He didn't finish the ginger factory and he was impeached. From the time of Balarabe Musa till today, the ginger factory, they have not added one block. Where he died, and that is the sign of industrial presence in the whole of Southern Kaduna by both federal and state government. Okay? So when you hear us rejoicing, this is the first time somebody asked, we on our day for class, yes, we come. In 1962, President Roosevelt, there was something dramatic that happened. There was this president who wanted, in the Supreme Court of America, he wanted Thurgood Marshall, a black man, to enter the Supreme Court. For a black man to enter the Supreme Court for the first time. And he didn't know what to do. So what he did was, he went to his friend, Justice Clark. Justice Clark, he was a justice of the Supreme Court. And he had helped him to campaign. So what he did was, he now went and promoted the son of Justice Ramsey to the position of Attorney General. After he made him Attorney General, Ramsey now realized that it would be foolish for him to remain in the Supreme Court while his son is Attorney General. So he decided to tender his resignation, which is what the president wanted. And because in the American Supreme Court, you stay until you die, or you say you don't want again. Even if you are on a wheelchair, you still remain, because it's for life. And it was when Justice Ramsey came out of the Supreme Court that Thurgood Marshall got a place. The point I'm making is that democracy is about equity, is about justice. We all want the same things. And I want to end by asking, how do we know that a country is democratizing? We can know by the quality of, even a blind man can tell when it is raining. We don't need to preach about democracy. The question people should ask is, why should we allow our people to be nostalgic about the military or about colonial rule? Because there are times Nigerians have said openly, we wish white people will come back. We wish the military will come back. We wish this person will come back. The question, therefore, is whether we measure our democracy by the kind of things we want for ourselves. There was something I was going to say, and I will just read it out. If you, Osita, thank you very much. I know I'm not likely to miss my flight because President Obasanjo has promised to give me a ride. There is a writer, name is Khalil Gibran. Some of you know about him. I quote what he said. He said, "Pity the nation that is full of beliefs but empty of religion. Pity the nation that wears a cloth it does not weave and eats the bread it does not harvest. Pity the nation that claims the bully as a hero. Pity the nation whose sages are dumb with years and whose strong men and women are still in the cradle. Pity the nation divided into fragments, with each fragment deeming itself a nation." Finally, there are 5 books that I would have highlighted, but it's not necessary. Because if you ask the average Nigerian politician, what book are you reading now? Okay? Maybe people are busy with matters of budget and appropriation. But you cannot be a president, you cannot govern this country without constantly engaging in mental reflection about what is happening elsewhere. So I recommend 5 books, if you are able to. One is Michael Pillsbury. And it's a fantastic book. The title of the book is The 100-Year Marathon. China's Secret Strategy to Replace America as the Global Superpower. It's a fantastic book. But it talks about what we are seeing in China now. They started planning 100 years ago. Nigerian politicians must therefore understand that delivering on these services takes a while. The second is great power inside the political mind, the human side of politics and how it shapes development. And then one of my favorite, Moses Naim, The End of Power. Why being in charge is not what it used to be. And then a second book by him, The Revenge of Power, How Autocrats Are Reinventing Politics in the 21st Century. And by Yashak Monk, The People versus Democracy, Why Freedom is in Danger and How to Save It. And Levitsky and Ziblatt, many of you know this, How Democracies Die, What History Reveals About Our Future, and so on. I want to end. In summary, the democratization of development. The democratization of development leads to the development of democracy. That is, if you decide to equitably democratize development and not take every institution, university, medical school, whatever, to your village, and if all the roads don't lead to your village, if you appreciate the fact that the poor people living on the hills, the poor people living across the river, they too didn't come to accompany you. So if we are honest enough to democratize development, we will be able to develop democracy. I thank you very much for your patience.
Let me congratulate my dear brother, Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, on this very auspicious celebration of your 60th birthday. See you, Emeka, and your dear wife. I said no because even from almost the near conclusions of the lead presenter, Bishop Kuka, he did say that democracy is work in progress. And even from our own experiences here in Nigeria, government in, government out, from 1999 to date, democratically elected, we have seen how government handled near similar issues differently. So I would like to say that there's more to do with the operators of a democratic system at a given time. If they play by the rules and they follow due process, democracy works. If they do otherwise, of course, it will be failure. So in that case, I would say it falters, it gets up, is work in progress. And I believe that we should not lose sight of the fact that democracy for now in Nigeria is the best system of government that we can have. And it is our responsibility as players to walk the walk and walk the talk and ensure that it works in Nigeria and in Africa.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to ask you one more question. Well, if you look at what Bishop Kuka said, he says the work in progress. Let me follow my brother when he said about 1999. If you look at where we are today, it's like they started in 1999, laid the foundation. Some people came and took it to a decking, and some people were trying to raise it to first floor, and some people came and knocked everything down. That's the situation where we are now. Everything has been knocked down. Nothing works. And I'm somebody who can say this exemplary. I became a governor through the court when President Obasanjo and Atiku were in government. I did not pay the court one error. I was sitting in my house in the office, and the court declared me winner. When a governor is so serious, it can't happen in Nigeria today. When I was being impeached, the president sent people to come and intervene on my behalf. Ken Naman came begging house people not to impeach me. Today, the president impeaches the person. So that is the thing. So it's collapse. And then, they were begging my house not to impeach me. And they were PDP. I was in anger. And they were begging. President was calling me and said, Peter, are you okay? Even when I was impeached, President Obasanjo called me and said, are you okay? Are you safe? When I go back from the court, when court eventually declared me under Ndimba, President Ihedioha called my phone in London and said, congrats. I said, President, I can't come back because, if I come back, these people, he said, tell me the flight in which you're coming back. And I told him, when I came in the first time, military people came to receive me at the airport. I couldn't believe it. I took me straight to him. Now the president will ask me not to come back here again. So he's saying, let's not talk about it. Let's talk about how we are going to do it. It's collapsing.
At democracy within the context of Africa, not just Nigeria. And I listened to the speaker where he talked about the challenges, but I'll go even further. I don't know whether many of us were aware of the meeting last week in Qatar between the president of Rwanda and the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo over the war that was going on there. But what I found very striking is how the two leaders could even meet. Because a few days before that meeting, the president of Rwanda granted an interview. And in that interview, he was very brutal on the president of the Republic of Congo. He gave an anecdote that there was this report that he read somewhere that an Italian man, an Italian who lived in Belgium, said that when he was in Belgium, that the current president of Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix, was a driver for him, a delivery driver. He was selling pizza. That's according to President Kagame. So he said, the Italian man said, when I heard that Felix became the president of Congo, I now, Felix couldn't deliver pizza. And I mean, it's President Kagame telling this story that you have a president in the Republic of Congo, a man who was so incompetent in his early life that he couldn't deliver pizza. That's the kind of president you have, the Republic of Congo has started to serve with. I don't think that story is true, but that's beside the point. The point really is that there are challenges for every country when it comes to management of politics. What the lesson for us is democracy is about serving the public good. It's not about it. That's why I agree to an extent with what His Excellency said. It's a work in progress. But I also agree with what His Excellency said, because there are also challenges that we can see within our own environment. But we have to look at both sides, the challenges as well as the prospects, and the role we can play to make this democracy better. That's what I will say. Democracy per se is with the operators. We all know this time. I mean, the same democracy that people have been talking about the United States for years, for decades, you can see the same democracy within the last. Can we say that the democracy we had in America in the last decades is the same democracy we have had in the last 2 months? That brings to us the role that individual can play within a system. So it's not peculiar to Africa. It's about how do we ensure that the operators play by the rules. I think that for me is the critical issue.
I still would go back to the same point that even in Nigeria, there's more to do with the operators. I'll give you an example. Here in this room, seated, is former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Under his regime, state of emergency was declared in a number of states. The National Assembly, then we had Senator Anyaoku as President of the Senate, and of course, Senator Ken Amani and Senator David Mark. They all worked. And then, of course, Speaker Masari was also Speaker of the House of Representatives, Speaker Ete and Dongole and myself at the point. We all ensured that 2/3 majority of members of both chambers passed the emergencies in those times.
By 2/3, each member had to vote.
Each member had to vote. And you know that Parliament is guided by the Constitution, by its rules, and by precedents. In this same National Assembly, we have the same Constitution in a way, under Section 305. It has not been amended since the commencement of this democracy. We have our standing rules, and we have precedents of how 2/3 were able to be established in those instances where emergency was declared in Plateau, emergency was declared in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. And we stuck by the rules, and were guided by the Constitution. What happened in the last one? So I still insist that you need to check out the operators of the system.
Well, I would say to China is not democratic.
It isn't.
And I'm not going to compare ourselves with Singapore. It's a country of less than 5 million people. But I'll compare ourselves with Indonesia. Indonesia is 280 million. And coincidentally, the country with the highest number of Muslims. We should look at their democracy. They have what we call proportional representative. That is what I've always championed and what you do. You cannot have, let me even go back, no country in the past 3 years conducted election had less than 30% of registered voters participate in the election, and they held it. Everyone was go and check from South Africa to Mexico to Indonesia. They were not less than 60%. Nigeria was 23% of registered voters. In that 23%, Nigeria is the only country where you can be declared a winner without receiving 50% plus one of the vote. Our own was 37%. And there's no proportional representation, which is why you can have opposition here. Because if you had that, what you said wouldn't have happened. Because the person there now have 37% of the vote, call it 40. In the Senate, would have had 44 members. PDP, with their leader, would have had about 34 members, and Labour would have had 24. In fact, we should have actually formed government. You cannot have a minority person sitting in government with everything, chasing everybody out, destroying everything. We must change it and have proportional representation so that they give us solution. That is how it works. And when we do that, go and see it in Indonesia. In Indonesia, the president's party is not the leading party in the parliament, but they have proportional representative, which brings proper checks and balances. Like he said, it's the operators. That's why I said it's failing. His argument shows that it's failing, because the operators now have failed it. That is one go back, it is failing.
in Singapore, people easily have talked about Rwanda, for instance, as a model in Africa, because at least people believe that the system is working for the majority of the people. I've never been to Rwanda, but I hear a lot of good things about Rwanda. But there are also people who believe that Rwanda is not a model. So that tells you about the way people reason about this democracy thing. Yeah, it's working for the ordinary people, but the elite are also complaining that there are issues of human rights, there are issues of justice. So at the end of the day, there is no perfect democracy anywhere in the world. But what is essential is that government, by any means, must serve the public good. I think, for me, that is the message we should all take from here.
I have been requested to say a few remarks about my relationship with Emeka, which actually started early 90s in Lagos. I have just established a printing press to fight the military, the Week magazine, and then, of course, in search of people to manage that magazine. My former special assistant, Chris Mama, brought on board Emeka, and together they managed the Week magazine successfully until I went into exile. Because Abacha's administration was so much against the Week magazine that I had to run into exile to the United States. Since then, Emeka and I have kept this relationship, and till today, I have found him extremely loyal, dedicated, and focused. Even though at one point in time we may find ourselves on different political divides, but we kept our relationship. And I think that testifies to the kind of person Emeka is. So let me use this opportunity. When he told me about this event, I was actually complaining. I said, Emeka, this is Ramadan, and then it is the last 10 days of Ramadan. And the last 10 days of Ramadan, we don't sleep in the night. We sleep during the day. He said, but Oga, try and make it. I said, okay, I will make it. And here we are today. I'd like to congratulate you, Emeka and Mrs. Emeka Ihedioha. Many happy returns of the day. Thank you.
Except that I must recognize my in-law, former President Obasanjo, because I don't want any possibility of their recalling my wife home. Well, my first words must be to congratulate the Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha and his dear wife for reaching the significant age of 60. I dare presume that I'm probably the oldest person in this room. If there's anyone who is older than 92, let him raise his hand. And since I see no hand raised, I must continue as the oldest person in the room. My namesake, as I would call him in popular parlance, Emeka, is a man who has, in his signature green heart, achieved things that we should be celebrating on his 60th birthday. As we heard, he was a member of the House of Representatives for 12 years, rising to become the Deputy Speaker,
from 2011 to 2015. And he also served as the executive governor of Imo State from 2019 to 2020. The theme of this colloquium is democracy. Is it failing in Africa? I think it's important to recognize the essence. What is the essence of democracy? And to recognize the essence of democracy, I think we should go back to its origin. Democracy, originating from a Greek word, was in fact, in its essence, the transfer of power which occurred in 508 BC, when the Greek statesman Cleisthenes transferred power in the ancient Greek city-state of Athens, which up to that time, up to 508 BC, was ruled by an oligarchic aristocracy. Cleisthenes thought that power should be exercised by the citizens of the society, and so he founded democracy. And since then, we have had all sorts of definitions of democracy, but as we were reminded by President Obasanjo, democracy in its essence was actually defined by Abraham Lincoln, who lived between 1809 and 1865. It was Abraham Lincoln who said that the essence of democracy is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. When the celebrant came to invite me to this colloquium, he asked me to tell the story of my role in promoting democracy in Africa. And so I'd like to tell you that when I was elected Commonwealth Secretary General in 1989, I pledged to the heads of government of the Commonwealth who elected me that my mission would be threefold. First, to make the Commonwealth a potent force for promoting democracy and human rights. And second, to try, in the words of the great Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, to seek to bring a healing touch to conflicts within and between Commonwealth member countries. And thirdly, to promote technical cooperation among Commonwealth countries for development. At the beginning of my tenure as Secretary General, there were 10 Commonwealth countries that were clearly non-democratic. They were countries that were under either one-party rule or under military rule. And my first attention was to try and persuade those countries that were under one-party rule to become multi-party democracies. So I went, after long conversations with President Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, with President Hastings Banda of Malawi, with President Albert Rone of the Seychelles, and with President Arap Moi of Kenya, I persuaded them to move from one-party state to a multi-party state. And in fact, in the case of Kenya, I sent a foremost Nigerian constitutional lawyer, the late Professor Ben Wabweze, to Kenya to help the Kenya government adapt its constitution from that which served one-party state to a multi-party state constitution. And then I believe that perhaps the most notable of my role was my seminal part in the transition from apartheid to democracy in South Africa. Briefly here, I would tell you that in November 1991, I went to South Africa and met with the last white president of South Africa, F.W. de Klerk. And I told him that I had come to see how the Commonwealth could help him in the conference which he had proposed, a conference between his government and the anti-apartheid political parties in South Africa. And that conference began on December 1, 1991. And I sent to that conference 6 eminent Commonwealth statesmen and women to be at the conference. And when the deliberations of the conference were threatened because of the massacre by apartheid police of 4 ANC stalwarts in a place called Boipatong, the conference was threatened. I flew to South Africa and I had meetings with the President, F.W. de Klerk, with the leader of the ANC, Mandela, with the leader of the PAC, Clarence Makwetu, and with the leader of the Afrikaner Party, General Constant Viljoen. For a while I could not find Gacha Buthelezi, who was the leader of the IFP. And if I may tell you an amusing story here, when I sent my staff to Ulundi, the capital of KwaZulu-Natal, where Gacha Buthelezi normally lived, and they could not find him, I went to State President F.W. de Klerk, and I said to him, I'm sure that your Secret Service would know the movement of Gacha Buthelezi. Could you tell me where he is? And President F.W. de Klerk said to me, Mr. Secretary General, Buthelezi is in the Holiday Inn in Pretoria under the name of Mr. Rogers. So I dialed the Holiday Inn myself. I didn't ask my secretary or my staff to call the Holiday Inn. I called the Holiday Inn and the switchboard answered, and I said, could you put me through to Mr. Rogers? And they put me through. And of course, I recognized immediately Gacha Buthelezi's voice. But I did say, is that Mr. Rogers? He said, yes. Who is it? And I said, Gacha is your brother chief here. And he shouted and said, how did you know where I am? And I said, in my position, you shouldn't be surprised that I'll be able to find out where you are. And I had a meeting with him because I prepared a one-page accord which I got the president and the leaders of the 4 main parties to sign, an accord to prevent or at least minimize violence in South Africa. And I sent some senior representatives of the Commonwealth to go to South Africa, and their presence helped to douse the violence. And furthermore, I organized a contingent of 26 policemen and women from over the Commonwealth, including Nigeria. The man who ended up as IG in Nigeria, Etim Inyang, was among the 26 policemen and women that I sent to South Africa. And their mission was to help the South Africa police, which had been used only to policing protests of anti-apartheid protesters and fighters, to help to teach them the techniques of community policing, and that they did. And mindful of the time, I'd like to say that I also sent a team of Commonwealth electoral experts to go together in terms of different ethnic nationalities by the Europeans in their conference in Berlin in 1884, 1885, that paid no regard to the cohesion of the ethnic nationalities. And so the management of diversity is a big challenge to African democracies, including here in Nigeria. Management of diversity is one of our biggest challenges, and as I have said, our founding fathers recognized the significance of management of diversity in agreeing the essentials of our 1960-63 Constitution. I don't believe, as I have said on many occasions, that our current Constitution of 1999 can address that subject. We need a different Constitution from what we have at the moment. And I must say that the country's management of diversity is, of course, a common challenge to democracies all over the world. But those countries that succeeded in remaining individual political entities, notwithstanding their diversity, have been countries that adopted truly federal constitutions. True federalism is the answer to the management of diversity. And true federalism means leaving at the center powers for managing the national issues, but giving the subnational entities enough power to look after their development and look after their internal security. I believe that the recent military coup d'etats in Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, and Niger are very worrying signals, because they tend to go back, take Africa back to the 1960s, 70s, when the anti-apartheid South African author, Ruth First, in her book, The Barrel of a Gun, said that an American Secretary of State said that he could not remember the number of times when he was woken up at night and told of yet another coup d'etat in an African country whose name sounded like a typographical error. And finally, I'd like to mention another challenge to our democracy in Nigeria, and that is the nature of our politics and the nature of the conduct of our politicians. Our political parties are not, as they should be, ideologically based. They are, on the whole, instruments for capturing political power. And that's a challenge to our democracy. And if I may conclude with one statement, I would say that it's only through stable democratic governance which would facilitate indigenous creativity and manufacturing that will, both in Nigeria and in African countries, be able to rid our continent of internal conflicts and lack of substantial socioeconomic development. Because these are the two factors that impede Africa's ability to change what is generally a Eurocentric narrative of Africa and the black people. A narrative that is the basis of racism and the looking down on Africans by other races. I believe that Nigeria, with its known attributes, has a special responsibility in changing this Eurocentric narrative. And I go on to remember a story told in 1971 at a Commonwealth meeting by late Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew said that in the 40s, cheap and inefficient gadgets were generally described as China or Japan. But since the 1940s, because China and Japan embraced development, industrial development, that description of inefficient gadgets stopped. And so we in Africa, and particularly we in Nigeria, have the responsibility of having a stable democracy which would enable our people to create and to manufacture. And by that, we would help to change the Eurocentric narrative of Africa and the black people. I thank you.
Thank you very much. 3 minutes will be so small to deliver his message and that of mine. The office of the Vice President, the Chairman of the occasion, former President of the Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Obasanjo, GCFR. Your Excellency, the former Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, Your Excellency, Atiku, GCON, Your Excellencies, the former presiding officers of the National Assembly. Let me especially recognize Right Honorable Emeka, Ihedioha, CON, the celebrant and his dear wife, the members of the National Assembly, both serving and past, here present, Your Excellency, the former Secretary General of Commonwealth, Chief Emeka Anyaoku, the keynote speaker that just left. Permit me to stand on the existing protocol. The speaker had desired to be here, but because of the prayer season, he went to Umrah, he went to Saudi Arabia, and asked me to deliver his speech on his behalf. The wordings are his. He's just borrowing my voice. I will abridge it because of the time that I allocated for this. It is with immense pride and honor that I join eminent Nigerians, present and former colleagues, and all guests who have assembled here today to celebrate one of our own, the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, His Excellency Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha of Mbize, Imo State of Nigeria. For 12 years, Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha served the Federal Republic of Nigeria as a lawmaker from the hallowed chambers of the House of Representatives. He served first as a member, then as a chief whip, later as Deputy Speaker of the House. This is not forgetting that he also served briefly as a speaker during his period when his principal went to be the governor of his state. Looking at his political trajectory, there is no doubt that Right Honorable Ihedioha is a well-rounded lawmaker, an astute politician, a great voice for the oppressed, and one who seeks to do good for the people. I'm therefore grateful to the Almighty God for blessing him with youthful looks and good health, even at 60. This colloquium in his honor is indeed meritorious and deserving. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Ihedioha's time in the House of Representatives were eventful years that added value to lawmaking and the development of our country. He was chairman of the House Committee on Marine Transport, in which role he was actively instrumental to passing key legislations that have positively impacted the Nigerian maritime sector. These included the International Convention for the Safety at Sea Ratification and Enforcement Act of 2004 and the International Convention on the Civil Liberties for Oil Pollution Damage Ratification and Enforcement Act of 2006. These laws aim at enhancing Nigeria's participation in international maritime framework. Between 2007 and 2011, he served as a chief whip of the House, a role that underscored his growing influence and ability to mobilize support within the chamber. His time as chief whip was signposted by his organizational skill and political acumen, which marked him out as a dependable compatriot. Ihedioha's most prominent role in the House came from 2011 to 2015, when he served as Deputy Speaker. His elevation to the position was dramatic. However, it was a result of strategic alliance that saw Aminu Tambuwa elected as Speaker. As Deputy Speaker, Ihedioha played a critical role in legislative oversight and leadership. He was very effective as the chairman of the Ad hoc Committee on the new legislative agenda, where he produced a comprehensive document adopted by the Seventh House to guide its policies and strategies. This agenda was also instrumental in deepening democracy and advancing public welfare, to which he personally committed his legislative journey. This question that we are addressing today is democracy failing in Africa. Calls for deep introspection, especially from the political class and those who have had the privilege of leading their constituencies and all their countries under the banner of democracy. However, I would rather that we ask, how is democracy growing in Africa? For me, it depends on what we make of democracy in Africa. Only by understanding that and deeply reflecting on it, can we be in a position to say if democracy has added value to development and growth in the continent or not. For me, and the 10th House of Representatives, democracy has come to stay in Africa and indeed Nigeria. It is a process which over the past 2 decades has crystallized into an acceptable model of leadership. And it is being consolidated in our nation. Nigeria is making steady progress despite varying challenges, characteristics of a developing nation. One of the basic features of democracy is the periodic conduct of election to choose leaders to whom the people, as argued by classical English philosopher Thomas Hobbes in his book Leviathan, willfully submit their will and agree to be governed by the few. Hobbes tells us that to escape the state of nature where life is brutish, nasty and short, like Bishop said, individuals surrender their individual rights and freedom to a central authority. In return, they get protection and security which allows the individual to live in peace and safety. This is the essence of democracy. Democracy guarantees the right of the people to hold divergent views, form, and belong to association of their will and conduct, their affairs, with respect to the right of others. Therefore, looking at it from this perspective, there is no doubt that democracy has added value to life on the continent and in Nigeria. It has guaranteed structural and systemic changes and sustainable growth. It has been responsible for the development of our societies and promoted good neighborliness and proper order of society. It has given us the platform in the legislature to make laws for the good governance of our country. Today, in the 10th House of Representatives, we develop a legislative agenda and capture the development agenda of the President, that captures the development agenda of the present administration to address issues that affect the people. And in less than 2 years in office, we have received and considered over 2,000 bills, out of which over 100 bills have been passed into law. We received and considered over 1,000 motions, received close to 500 petitions, out of which over 300 were considered an appropriate legislative action taken. Some of the key legislation included the Minimum Wage Amendment Bill, which more than doubled the national minimum wage, student loan, Access to Higher Education Act 2024, which has provided Nigerian families and children access to non-interest loans to ensure that no child is left behind in education in Nigeria. The Judicial Office Holder Salaries and Allowances Bill 2024, which has become an act aimed at ensuring fair compensation for judicial officers to protect judicial independence and promote efficiency in that arm of government. The Cybercrime Prohibition and Prevention etc. Act of 2024, which strengthens measures to combat the rising cases of and threat of cybercrime to ensure a safer digital space for individuals and businesses in Nigeria. However, it is not yet a Dorado. According to Democracy Index 2024, published by the Economic Intelligence Unit, EIU, of the Economics in February 2025, 45% of the world's population live in a democracy. 39% live under authoritarian rule, while 15% live in hybrid regime. The EIU described hybrid regime as government that combine electoral democracy with authoritarian tendencies. Except for about 10 African countries, the rest are grouped under the hybrid index. There are a plethora of other studies and indexes that score Africa low on the practice of democracy. There is no doubt in the fact that the democracy highlighted by regular election has not been exactly what we expect. But it will be unhelpful to measure the progress of democracy simply by looking at how regular elections are conducted. Therefore, we should focus on other elements of democracy, which includes the independence of the independence of the judiciary, protection of individual rights, freedom, protection of minority rights, free and fair election, accountability and transparency, respect for separation of power, civic participation and engagement, independent media and freedom of expression, respect for the outcome of election. These are the things that define democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, let me round up by saying once again, congratulations to our brother, His Excellency, the Right Honorable Emeka Ihedioha, for his 60th birthday, and we wish him many more years of good health and service to our fatherland. Thank you and God bless you.
So one guy came to us and he said he wanted to be a councillor. And the party executive didn't want him to be a councillor. They came to me and said the boy is useless. And I saw him as a very useful person. We dragged on and on. And then the boy went and bought forms. So one day the ward chairman came to me and said, "Sir, you know you are backing the wrong person." I said, "Why?" He said, "The boy's name is not even in our register. He's not a member of our party. How can he be a councillor under our party?" So I told him, I called the boy, and the boy produced PDP membership card. So the boy said I should call for the register. I told the ward chairman, I said, "Okay, tomorrow bring the register." So he said, "Okay." He brought the ward register, and lo and behold, the boy's name was not there. Then the boy came and said, "I saw the register, my name is in it." You know what the ward chairman did? He bought a new foolscap paper and produced new register, and the boy's name was simply omitted from it. And so the boy wasn't in the register. When he was a determined boy, he went back and started campaign again, and then eventually was elected a councillor. So Emeka is a very determined person. His short period in Imo witnessed a lot of development. He has gone back to the trench. He's doing his best. In the next election, he will be the governor of the Imo State. Thank you.
Vice President represented here, the celebrant, General Obasanjo, Vice President Atiku, and my uncle is here, you're welcome. Well, let me stand on existing protocols after that. Of course, my Ogas are here, Oga Masari and Mrs. Olukwete. I can forget about Tamboy, my junior in this business. And of course, my dear brother, you're welcome. Senator Mark, I must adopt whatever Senator David Mark has said, because as you know, he was the chairman when I was speaker in the House, so I therefore not join in any issues with him. Now, I must also clear an issue here by adopting whatever Balogun also said. See, Osita, you are looking for trouble on this age matter. You see, officially, 92, officially. But those of us who know anything about Abeokuta, there may be an unofficial age sitting here. I said maybe. Let me just try to remember, I don't want to ask for a visa before I get back to Abeokuta, so please don't get me into trouble here.
A better future for Nigerians. You are one of the most resourceful and energetic people that I know, and I hope you can apply some of that energy to creating viable pathways forward for our society in the Southeast and for Nigeria at large. Thank you.
Right Honorable, former Deputy Speaker, former Governor of Imo State, who has presented a moral dilemma for Igbo people. For every Igbo man, the question is, where do you stand on the removal of Emeka Ihedioha as governor of Imo State? If you stand on the left, you are forever a man of history. If you do not stand on the right side of history, you will forever be remembered for shame and for disgrace to Igbo land.
Your Excellencies, Mr. President, Baba of the House of Representatives, our leader, the former Commonwealth Secretary General, former presiding officers of the National Assembly, Senate, and House, incumbent members of the National Assembly, former governors here gathered, former ministers, and I must single out Mrs. Marjorie Okadibo, the wife of my late boss, who is here, and for your presence, remember Dr. Chuba Okadibo. My family, my wife, as a point of contact, my political family, the young men and women who have stood by me, who have believed in me, my social friends and allies, my political friends, and indeed well-wishers, my cultural friends, my religious associates, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Sikibo, you're still owing. Maybe when you discuss about Baba, he'll give you permission to pay in every currency. To say that I'm overwhelmed, to say that I'm very happy, to say that my day is made would just be an understatement. Earlier, Limoke said the man, Emeka, and the family. But he didn't tell you about, I'm sure you forgot that Emeka's stories are about 5 senior sisters and 4 immediate younger sisters. And so to usher me in was goodwill messages from two reputable, respectable women in our land. And that gives you an idea of my story. My mom, of blessed memory, would have been overjoyed to be here. And my dear wife, who knows that I'm indeed a good husband. Elder statesmen, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. From President Obasanjo, who has been up since about 5 to ensure he cut up his flight. He was ready to leave. He got to the airport even before 8. By the time they finished documentation, he came straight from the airport. Vice President Atiku sat dressed ready by 8 a.m. because he said he doesn't want to be late before his boss would I proceed. To every other person who is here. My best man during my wedding, Andy Esemezie, who lives in Canada, said he must be here to witness this and celebrate his friend. To all of you who have left all that you are doing, I understand, I appreciate. And so that's why when I'm out and about, attending functions of friends, my wife understands why I have to do that. Even when I come back very late at night, she knows why. My life, I must say, I thank God for the parents that I had. I had a mother who would wake me up by 4 a.m. in the morning when I commit those usual bad behaviors. She would leave me to sleep by 4 a.m. because I was the only boy at the time before being a camp. So I had 5 senior sisters and 4 younger sisters. So my mom would leave me. About 4 a.m., she would use kuboku. At that time, there would be no interference. So I'm alone in the room with her. So flog the hell out of me. So for the next 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I'll be a big boy. So my father who taught me that, my father said to me, Emeka, the most expensive habit is keeping friends. I said, very expensive. I never understood until today. Some of you have spent millions of naira to keep faith with me today. So now you understand, I understand. Some persons came from outside the country, you have an idea of the cost. And when we were commencing this process, some people felt we were going to discuss Emeka and the issues in Imo State. I'm happy you have seen that that is a matter in the past. That's not the subject. And the subject is not to talk about my future. But the subject is simply to gather Nigerians to talk about the well-being of our people and talk about democracy, which we believe in. I've lived my life pursuing the cause of democracy. And so when I take certain positions, it should be understood. I do not take positions because I like you or not like you, but because I believe that democracy remains the best form of governance in our land. And because I know I do no other business than pursuing this cause, it makes sense for me to do everything to sustain it. And I want to urge everyone that at times like this, that we should all rise and protect this institution. For me, I've been in legislature for 12 years. I've passed that to that institution, and so I remain committed to that institution. I had the privilege of serving in the executive as a staff and later as an elected governor. And so I would also protect that institution. And I think that judiciary is very fundamental in our stability. So I urge all men and women of goodwill, all of us gathered here, very distinguished Nigerians. From my home state, Governor Atiku is leading a team that includes former Governor Ihedioha and many others are serving Senator. I'm at home with my people, we're at home. But it's important that we do everything we can without fear of favor and speaking truth to power to sustain and protect this institution, to protect democracy. I appeal to all of us. Mistakes have been made and will always be made. What is important is the way forward.
I had a very wonderful upbringing. I didn't come from very rich background. I had a modest background. Civil service parents. They kept telling me that good name is better than money. But in the course of development, I've had access to money. But I've also known the money you should not touch and the one you cannot. And I know that there is life after money. And that as long as God lives, and I must be honest, what we are doing today, I will not, it's essentially not my money. I did not beg. But friends who cared, friends who know that this must happen, have made sure it has happened. Tonight, I'll be hosting virtually everyone here, and perhaps more, also in the same manner. I'm overjoyed with gratitude. Governor Masari would have been, Speaker Masari would have been in Katsina today, but he said, Emeka, I must celebrate you. Vice President Obaka would have been out of town today. He said, Emeka, I will celebrate you. Of course, my brother, Aminu Tambuwa, will be traveling later this night, but he had to be here to honor us. President Obasanjo had to cut short a few other programs to be here. Likewise, all of you. I don't want to join that debate of who is the oldest man. Officially, for the oldest man here, he told me that this year he has only committed himself to traveling outside Lagos twice. But Emeka, because you've come, I'll make it a third one. I'm indeed very grateful. I can't talk about everyone. The Deputy Governor of Enugu and Deputy Governor of Abia. You came in because your bosses have commitments, state functions that they couldn't leave to be here, but they've ensured they sent our best regards. My family is indeed very, very grateful. I'm happy for the kind of family I have, the parentage I have, for my siblings who have shown me love and support over the years. For my wife who has sustained me in prayer that even at very difficult times will still keep going. That in spite of the tribulations and difficulties that have come our way, that God who remains God and who is. And I must say, sir, I have very wonderful children who are making me proud. From my daughter, whom I told yesterday that if I don't see her, she's in the UK. I said, if I don't see you, I have another daughter. She has called me more than 10 times. And said, Daddy, please, are you sure that we said? I said, well, I'm still watching you. If I see you, I change my mind. But if I don't see you, anything can happen. So just before I got in, she said, Daddy, please don't do that thing you said you will. She enjoys to be the only daughter of the house. To my children who are unavoidably absent because they want to be better than me tomorrow, they would have all been here, and I seek that you all understand. My younger brother, Obina, you've been a rock, and I appreciate you for who you are. Madam Ete, the only woman among the men, but at every point in time you outshine them. It looks like you have a uniform with your son, Aminu Tambuwa. So we'll discuss. Governor Masari will tell us what happened and at what points and what way. I thank you most sincerely. And I want to assure you that I remain whom I am. I'll be unfazed. I will remain your friend. I will remain consistent. I will remain supportive and protective of our institution. May God bless all of you. For me and democracy, it is still God do us apart. My brother Donald Duke tried to harass me that he will not come, and I said, let me see how you won't come, because I know so much that the world should not hear. Thank you very much. Don't you Amechi, tomorrow call me senior. Tambuwal has killed, Dimeji has killed, so you know that this business. I told Tambuwal and Dimeji that today there is no Mr. Speaker, that what we have today is Dimeji and Aminu. So maybe after today we'll do a review. Senator Namani, our boss, our chairman of former presiding officers forum, Senator Dolphus Wabara, my Oga, Senator David Mark has taught me so much in recent times. That business he was doing with Waba, he taught me and Aminu. And I believe we've learned very well and we're doing interestingly very well. My brother Opute, You know, you fly all over the place, and your flight landed this morning to be here. I thank every one of you from the bottom of my heart. When Governor Ihedioha told me that he was 85 years old, I thought it was a joke. So I'm sure when we count Anyaoku, SNOKK, of course, Baba. Am I saying anything? My senior brother and elder, Professor Jerry Ghana, who said, and you know, he would always speak and speak well. Finally, Nearly Moke, my senior brother, and your team that have put this together, I remain immensely grateful. All of you who have contributed, all of you who have worked. Kayode came in, he also moves like Tambua, so you may not know where he is at any point. But he said to me, wherever I am, I will perch here. Maybe after here, I may not know where next I will go to. So I take notes by here. General Olagoseye Oyilola, every one of you, Governor Samegu, where do I begin? And the policeman of the house, the honorary policeman, Adamu Waze, Abdul Fattah, Chief SNOKK, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am happy. God bless you. They will.
We have come to the end of this wonderful program today.